Evening, welcome to Life Group. It's great to have you here. So what we're going to be looking at is the passage from Sunday, which was Acts chapter 4, verse 23 to the end of the chapter. And the big thing that this part of Acts shows us is it shows us what a spirit-filled church looks like, what spirit-filled Christians do. And I guess the big thing that the Spirit always wants to do is he always wants to speak of the Lord Jesus. He wants to bring glory to the Lord Jesus. And we see in our passage tonight the two ways that being filled with the Spirit will cause Christians to speak. And we see it firstly, and to act as well. We see it firstly in the way that we interact with people who aren't Christians, that if we are filled with the Spirit, then we boldly speak about Jesus. And we also see that if we're filled with the Spirit, that we seek to encourage other Christians. We seek to meet their needs, we seek to build them up in the faith. So just, you've probably read the passage, but just flip back over it. So we're in Acts chapter 4. Do you remember what's happened is Peter and John were at the temple, and then they were told that they should not speak about the Lord Jesus anymore, but they do, and they come back and they report it, and they're told, they tell the rest of the disciples, and the rest of the disciples obviously quite scared, but they pray, and they pray to God, you see there in verse 24, as sovereign Lord, the one with absolute power who made the heavens, the earth, everything in them. And they recognise that the sovereign Lord of everything is in control of everything. And they see that the way that Jesus was treated is just like the way that God's promised Messiah was said that he was going to be treated in Psalm 2, that people would plot in vain. And that's what these different people did, Herod and Pontius Pilate. They tried to get rid of the Lord's anointed, but they did, you see verse 28, what your power and will decided beforehand would do. They have this great big view of God, and so they pray to him and they ask him to act. And interestingly, verse 29, they ask him to act in such a way, not so that they get rid of all the problems, but so that they would speak the word with boldness. They want to join in with God's mission. They recognise that God's king was persecuted, and probably his people are going to be as well. And so that's a bit scary. And so they ask for God to give them boldness to do the thing that they know they're being called to do. And so we're going to think a little bit in our groups about what does it look like for us to speak the word with boldness. But the other thing that is a mark of a church filled with the Spirit, so there is this kind of prayerfulness and an eagerness to want to see the gospel go out. That's a mark of the Spirit. But the second mark was there in verse 32 to the end of the chapter, where we saw that all the believers were gathered together as one. There was real unity. There wasn't division. And the way that they acted and interacted with each other meant that, verse 34, there was no needy person amongst them. Even though there was 5,000 believers and some of them were very rich and some were very poor, what happened was the rich people voluntarily chose to sell some land or property and gave it to the apostles so that it could be distributed to make sure that everyone's needs were met, particularly those needs of housing and food. They didn't have a welfare state like we do. And what we're going to think as well is about how does that apply to us as a church family? What would it look like for us as a church to be loving each other generously, like in this way, generously seeking to meet each other's needs? They may be financial, but often our needs at the moment might not be financial. They might be other needs. How could we get to know one another's needs? How could we generously seek to help there? So we're going to, in this, in our small groups, in your small groups now, you're going to chat through that passage and think specifically about kind of being filled with the Spirit. And it might be that the application, the biggest take home from this would be to pray that you would be filled with the Spirit, that our church would be filled with the Spirit, that we would be more and more transformed. And probably as we're praying those things, there's some practical things that we could do to move forward in those areas. So I'm praying for you as you meet now and as you discuss. I pray that you'll have a great time together and that it'll be really useful to you in your Christian lives. See you now. Bye-bye.